In a shocking and abrupt public declaration, a man coldly annuls his engagement to Frederica Castri as of that very moment. The grand ballroom falls into a stunned silence as the man stands proudly beside his new lover while the blonde woman turns her back to them. Looking utterly devastated and humiliated, Frederica quietly consents to the sudden annulment of their engagement and whispers that it is understood. Gathering the remnants of her shattered pride, the young noblewoman begins to walk away from the glittering crowd and her former fiancé. A sharply dressed man in the crowd gasps in pure shock as the tragic scene unfolds before him. As whispers ripple through the crowd about how awful it is to treat her like that in public, Frederica realizes all eyes are gathered on her and decides she must get out of there as quickly as possible. Fleeing the suffocating ballroom, she breaks into a desperate run while tearfully wondering why this is happening to her. Desperate to escape the judging eyes of the people, she decides she wants to return to the dressing room she had borrowed. Panic sets in as she sprints through the empty corridors, realizing with horror that she won't make it in time. Lamenting that her snapped underwear string is slipping down, she presses her thighs together to hold it in place but finds it incredibly hard to run. Flashing back to earlier that day, she recalls how rumors of Eugene's change of heart had already come flying to her without her even asking. She wonders if his betrayal was due to the mismatched statuses of a ducal house and the daughter of a viscount who rose from merchant roots, or if it was simply a matter of jealousy. Struggling with the emotional weight of the evening, she honestly tries to process the immense humiliation. She remembers hearing that his new lover, though a commoner, is widely said to be considerate, graceful, and kind. Refocusing on her immediate physical predicament, she decides her snapped underwear string is a far bigger crisis than her fiancé's change of heart. Frustrated that she frugally trusted her old garment, she questions why she thought it would hold and wonders why her maid Marie didn't stop her. Suddenly tripping over her own cumbersome dress in the hallway, she falls with a painful thud and quickly utters an "excuse me." Her elegant descent is halted violently as she collapses directly at the polished boots of a towering military officer. The imposing man in the ornate uniform kneels down, extending a gloved hand to ask the fallen lady if she is all right. Frederica stares up in absolute shock, her eyes wide as she processes the face of the man standing before her. Concerned by her frozen state, the officer softly asks the lady for a response. He asks if she is hurt anywhere, while she internally panics at being this close to General Volker Brennan, who is renowned as the strongest war god since the nation's founding. Blushing fiercely, she hastily assures General Brennan that she is fine and thanks him very much for his concern. Apologizing for making her drop her handkerchief, he expresses relief that she isn't injured, leaving her completely captivated by his gallant yet gentle eyes. Her heart skips a beat as she gazes deeply into the general's surprisingly tender eyes. The atmosphere shifts to pure panic as the general kneels closer, and she realizes her awkward and revealing predicament is dangerously close to being exposed. Noting she looks short of breath, the general assures her he won't treat her badly, prompting her to miraculously trust him despite having just met. Apologizing to the general, she claims fainting is part of noble etiquette and practically second nature, begging him to please take her to the dressing room. With dramatic flair, she completely loses consciousness and collapses into his panicked embrace as he shouts out to her. Catching her securely against his chest, the bewildered officer is immediately struck by how incredibly light she feels. Gazing down at her unconscious form, he admires her radiant hair and pale skin, thinking she looks exactly like a fairy. Flustered by his own inappropriate thoughts, he covers his face in embarrassment and desperately tells himself to calm down and stop overthinking. He carefully adjusts his grip on the delicate girl, holding her safely against his broad shoulder. Staring intently at her peaceful face, he cannot help but marvel at how incredibly small she is. Realizing he just turned 35 and she might only be 16 or 17, he questions what he is thinking about a girl young enough to be his daughter at a ball meant for young ladies about to be married. Snapping back to reality, he carefully gathers her belongings, making sure not to lose her dropped handkerchief. Scooping her up completely into his arms, he resolves that he must find someone from this lady's household to assist them. A panicked young girl with a bow in her hair rushes over, crying out for her miss, and the general quickly asks if she is the lady's attendant. Addressing the tearful maid, he announces that he will take her straight back to the residence. He politely asks the maid to guide them to the dressing room so they can carry her somewhere she can lie down and rest. Wondering if moving her while unconscious could be dangerous due to a chronic illness, he asks if it wouldn't be better to let her rest a bit first despite it being presumptuous. The general narrows his eyes astutely, noticing that the young maid is choosing her words incredibly carefully. The maid clarifies that her mistress has no such condition, but she thought the lady might not wish to remain near the person who put her through this humiliating ordeal. Carrying the sleeping noblewoman with the utmost care, the general descends the grand staircase toward a waiting horse-drawn carriage. Understanding the delicate situation and deciding that prying any further would be tactless, he agrees to proceed to the carriage as is. Frederica rests peacefully against the plush cushions of the carriage, completely oblivious to her safe escape. The maid finally introduces herself as Marie, attendant to Lady Frederica Castry, daughter of Viscount Castry, and respectfully asks for the general's name. Deeply grateful for his timely intervention, Marie thanks the commanding officer for his incredible kindness. Still half asleep in the swaying carriage, Frederica softly murmurs the name, Lord Brennan. Introducing himself as Volker Brennan, head of security for tonight's ball, he insists no thanks are necessary and kindly instructs Marie to see that her mistress gets proper rest. A young maid with a neat hat bows respectfully in front of a window or doorway. A mounted guard watches diligently near a towering iron gate under the glow of the night sky. General Brennan stands quietly as the horse-drawn carriage clatters away through the grand iron gates into the night. Turning his attention from the departing carriage, the imposing general calls out to a nearby knight. The young knight stands at attention as Brennan orders him to simply act as an escort without frightening the passengers. Saluting briskly, the knight accepts the command to escort the carriage safely all the way to the Castry estate. Staring thoughtfully at his gloved hand, Brennan admits to himself that he felt strangely reluctant to lower the delicate girl from his arms. Piecing the situation together, the general recalls that Lady Castry was engaged to the son of Duke Cajays and finds her presence at the ball unsurprising. Shifting his gaze back toward the grand ballroom, Brennan's eyes narrow as he notices a commotion. He realizes immediately that something feels completely off about the atmosphere inside. His sharp instincts flare up as he confirms that something feels deeply wrong within the venue. Inside the hall, elegant attendees cover their mouths and whisper in a state of absolute shock. A subordinate reports that 20 minutes prior, Lord Eugene arrived with an uninvited woman and publicly annulled his engagement to Lady Frederica, sending the hall into chaos. A panicked guard rushes up to deliver a report, prompting the general to demand exactly what happened. Absorbing the grim news, Brennan instructs the soldier to return to his post. The soldier shouts his confirmation, swearing he witnessed and heard the entire disgraceful spectacle clearly with his own eyes. With a dark and intimidating glare, the general demands to know if the unbelievable report is truly accurate. Realizing the severity of the situation, he thinks of how the delicate, lovely fairy had her engagement annulled and was humiliated before everyone. Covering his face with his hand in deep sympathy, the general mutters about how absolutely terrible her ordeal was. Clenching his fist, he reflects on how utterly heartbreaking the public betrayal must have been for the young lady. Connecting the dots, he figures the overwhelming tension she held must have completely snapped the moment she collided with him. Staring solemnly ahead, he concludes that the handkerchief she dropped was likely meant to wipe away her hidden tears. Meanwhile, Frederica's large eyes slowly flutter open as she finally regains consciousness. Sitting up in her lavish bed, a confused Frederica glances around and wonders aloud why her maid Marie isn't present. Stretching her arms with a bright smile, she happily declares that she slept well and feels completely refreshed. Her maid suddenly bursts into loud, heartbroken sobs, wailing about how Eugene cruelly violated Frederica by annulling her engagement as a public spectacle. Startled by the dramatic weeping, Frederica leans forward and gently asks if Marie is feeling unwell or if something terrible happened. Panicking internally, the young noblewoman immediately assumes the absolute worst and asks in horror if her perfectly healthy father has suddenly died. Staring in absolute dread, Frederica realizes her maid's unusual agitation must mean a devastating tragedy has occurred. Sniffling loudly, the tearful maid looks up in pure confusion at her mistress's wild conclusion. Blushing fiercely, Frederica awkwardly clears her throat and pretends she understands the situation perfectly. The maid wipes her tears and firmly confirms the truth of the situation. Blushing brightly, Marie stammers out a frantic question about why her mistress was running around without her underwear on. Breaking into a cold sweat, Frederica asks if Marie told anyone, only to freeze when she learns the master, madam, and butler all know. Utterly defeated by the humiliating revelation, Frederica slumps face first into her soft pillows with a heavy sigh. She mentally traces the disaster, realizing that after she fainted to hide her slipped underwear, a shocked Marie naturally discovered the truth while changing her into nightwear. The door bursts open as the three people who must never see weakness rush in, frantic over their ultimate nuisance of a daughter. Recovering her composure slightly, Frederica gently instructs her frantic maid to calm down. Despite finding the entire ordeal to be a massive nuisance, she decides it would be entirely too cruel to leave Marie worrying over a misunderstanding. Peeking out from her bed curtains, she notes with dread that the top 3 authority figures of the household have all assembled in her room. Standing with grim expressions, her family firmly demands to hear the full truth behind the evening's scandalous events. Blushing with immense embarrassment, she awkwardly concludes her detailed explanation of the disastrous wardrobe malfunction. Grumbling that she cried for nothing, she asks for tea to rehydrate and explains how she collided with the general and fainted entirely out of pure awkwardness. Her exhausted father sighs that the detailed underwear report was unnecessary, though she proudly defends her brand-new, highly durable pair. Gripping her blankets tightly, she declares with absolute conviction that the importance of secure underwear has truly sunk into her bones. Her mother chides her sharply, telling her to stop applying her frugality in the wrong direction by wearing undergarments until they snap. Shifting to serious matters, her mother asks how they will handle the annulled political marriage and the resulting harsh societal judgment. She reflects on her family history, noting that the king personally granted her great-uncle a viscount title, sparking a noble resentment that continues to this day. During a devastating war, her merchant great-uncle donated his entire fortune to save the military treasury and brought the conflict to a safe ceasefire. Smiling softly, she embraces her heritage, acknowledging that their strict dedication to business sense and frugality makes them incredibly unusual in a society that demands extravagance. Flashing back to the harsh whispers of noble society, Frederica remembers how the malicious women sneered that the ducal house only wanted her for her family's immense wealth. The cruel voices echo in her mind, strictly warning her never to misunderstand her place as a mere financial asset. Staring solemnly ahead, the young noblewoman quietly reaffirms to herself that she never misunderstood their cold intentions. Lowering her gaze in quiet contemplation, she admits that the sudden annulment has left her feelings rather complicated. She recalls how she never opposed the political engagement, having firmly believed that marrying for love was an entirely unrealistic dream for nobles. A wistful expression crosses her face as she confesses she still harbored some girlish ideals and quiet admiration. Picturing her serious parents, she notes that entering a convent or becoming a second wife are now the only viable futures for someone so publicly disgraced at a marriage gathering. Smiling with a trace of bitter resignation, she softly laments that the humiliating annulment will almost certainly leave her entirely unmarriageable. Shocked by her own vulnerability, she sighs that the ordeal is hitting her much harder than expected and accidentally blurts out her slim hopes for a blissful newlywed life just as her father calls her name. Startled out of her daydream, she listens in disbelief as her mother casually suggests finding a stallion to father a child just to give them a grandchild. Her parents cheerfully assure her she doesn't need to force a marriage, joking that she can just work like a carriage horse forever since her cousin can inherit the title. Exasperated by their terrible phrasing, Frederica asks why they are comparing her to a horse while her parents merely laugh off their deeply unconventional advice. The light-hearted family banter is abruptly cut short when a frantic voice announces that someone is coming to visit and check on her. Bursting through the heavy double doors in an absolute panic, Marie screams for her mistress at the top of her lungs. Frozen in pure confusion, a wide-eyed Frederica desperately demands to know what the maid's frantic warning is supposed to mean. Her composed father praises their butler Oliver for efficiently handling a messenger from their unexpected benefactor. The sharp-dressed butler reports that he promptly consented to the military master's request to visit Lady Frederica this very afternoon. A bead of nervous sweat drops down Frederica's face as the overwhelming reality of the situation sets in. Clutching her face in sheer panic, she repeatedly stammers out her disbelief that General Brennan is actually coming to their house. Burying her blushing face in her hands, she wails about falling for the incredibly considerate general while frantically wondering what kind of wife he already has. Spiraling into total anxiety, she paces the room and wonders how to face the man she inconvenienced so greatly with her careless fainting. She wildly questions if the military actually teaches their officers the proper, graceful way to catch a pitiful swooning lady. Cutting through her frantic rambling, her father firmly presses a finger to his lips in a sharp gesture for silence. Fixing her with a serious glare, The Viscount strictly commands his daughter to keep both her rampant feelings and her lips tightly reined in. He sternly forbids her from letting her embarrassing inner thoughts spill straight out of her mouth. Taking full control of the situation, her father announces he will handle the hospitality and orders her to eat a light meal, bathe, and change. The loyal butler bows respectfully and promises to execute the master's orders without delay. Left alone to scheme, her calculating parents stroke their chins and discuss whether the high-ranking general might actually be an excellent seed for their family. Smirking with sharp, mercantile ambition, the Viscountess declares they must thoroughly evaluate this so-called noble prospect. While her parents plot to inspect the general's worth ruthlessly, a blissfully unaware Frederica enthusiastically plans a hearty morning omelette with her equally starving maid.